Hey, how's it going today? So for this video, I just want to take some time to talk about my sketching workflow and the basic pipeline I like to use when I'm trying to create a new character design and generate some quick thumbnails to explore some of the different variations we can go through when we're designing. So one of the first steps is I like to create a bunch of these flat silhouettes, these nice clear, bold shapes. And if you start out with just the flat silhouettes, you can create a whole bunch of them pretty quickly. It only takes a couple of minutes for each flat shape. And then once you have a series of these flat shapes, we can go in and try and fill in the details and the features that will give the flat shape some three-dimensional form and allow someone who's looking at it to understand, what's going on with the interior shapes and geometry of these silhouettes. So when we're filling these in, the tools I like to use are my lasso tool as well as my hard round brush. And we're just thinking about where the shadows, the deep pocket of shadows are going to be. And we're going to draw those in and use them as sort of anchor points to then think about where everything else is going to go. So right now I'm starting with this eye socket. It's kind of the easiest feature to draw in that will give you the most sort of information that will allow you to then go through the rest of the image and draw everything else out. So once I know where the eye goes, I can then place the nose and the nostril, and then from there we can kind of estimate where everything else is going to be located and start filling it in. So even here with these, just a small block of shadow in the eye with a few of these other lines, we can already start to get a clear idea of what this face is going to look like and how the features are going to be shaped. And we can go in and just start filling everything in. We're just adding in these little blocks of shadow that give the eye more information so that we can understand, what's going on here. What sort of geometry is this face made out of? Kind of showing that it has a very elongated upper lip and lower jaw, showing how the face kind of pushes out from the cranium area. We're just kind of guesstimating where things are going to go, filling in our shadow shapes here, and just thinking about how we can make this 2D shape feel more three-dimensional. Now, as we're sort of imagining these different shapes and forms and kind of picturing them in 3 dimensions here, we also want to stop and think about what sort of character are we designing? What sort of character traits do they have? What type of personality do they have? How do they fit and interact within the world that they live in? And as we think about this, we want to try and create shapes and proportions within the face that will help show what type of character this is. So like if you're designing a brute or someone that's very, blunt and straightforward, you want to try and create facial features and expressions that will help describe that to the viewer. And then if you're creating someone that's maybe a little bit more thoughtful and introspective, maybe a little bit more intelligent, then you want to try and create features that's going to show that as well. So anytime you're designing a character, you want to always try and be thinking about how is the viewer going to see this person? What sort of personality is going to come through when they view them? Can you give them a scowl to help describe, the personality? Can you give them a smile? How do the eyes look through the character? Like, are they squinting? Are they round open eyes? Do they have a deep recession in the socket that casts a shadow over the eyeball? These are all kind of like things you want to think about because they're going to influence the way the viewer is going to feel about the character. If you're trying to design someone that's happy and outgoing and very bubbly, but you give them very deep eye sockets that cast a shadow over the eye, and you give them a scowl on their face, that personality trait isn't going to come through in your design. So we want to make sure we're trying to match the personality and character traits to the actual physical features in the face, and make sure that those are matching up and sending the message that we want to send to the viewer. A big part of concept art is communicating visually. So anytime we're working on something or creating an image, we want to always be thinking in the back of our head, is this communicating the story or the idea that I have? Am I getting the message across through this image? Or am I just drawing something interesting for the sake of drawing something interesting? If you're practicing or just doing it to relax, nothing wrong with just drawing something for the sake of drawing it. But if you're drawing something in concept art, the whole point is to create a concept that communicates an idea. So we always want to think about, is this being communicated how I want it to be communicated, or is it coming across differently? Is someone going to look at this and have a different idea than the one I was originally intending? Sometimes we need a little bit of intentionality behind what we're designing in order to be better at communicating with the viewer. All right, so at this point I have most of the geometry of the face worked out. You can tell where the major facial features are. You can get a pretty good sense of what the geometry is doing. It might not be perfect, still needs some work, but there's a general idea of what's going on within the silhouette now. We have some basic details. I'm just gonna add a little bit here to the neck just to kind of help inform the viewer of what the shapes are doing in the neck area. I'm just seeing if there's anything else we can put in here to reinforce our shapes. Sometimes if you drop a little dark shadow in, it helps pop a shape out. Reinforces the idea behind it a little bit more. All right, so now we're just going to cut these features out. We're just going to quickly just copy paste, and we're going to add them into our next silhouette. So instead of trying to draw the next one completely from scratch, we're just going to take what we've already worked on. We already put some time and effort into developing these shapes up. We're just going to copy paste them over and then start working on the next version. So we're still doing a similar face, but with the different shapes kind of skewed a little differently. And again, these aren't finished sketches or finished images. We're just trying to generate something that will help us come up with new ideas or help us explore, maybe a particular personality for a character. You might have to do 5, 10, 20 of these sketches before you can really wrap your head around who the character is that you're sketching and what type of personality you want them to have. And so by doing these over and over again with different shapes and different jaw size, different brow size, different facial features or expressions, maybe one of them has like a smile, one of them's frowning, one of them has the mouth open. By doing all these different sketches, you can wrap your head around the idea and come up with better solutions as you go. You might do one sketch and it feels pretty good, but you realize it's not really solving any problems or communicating in a way that matches up with the story idea that you have in your head. So you got to keep doing them over and over. Spend maybe an hour just trying to come up with fresh ideas, or even if they're not fresh ideas, just coming up with ideas that might be a slight twist on something that already exists. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes you can take something that's been done over and over again and just give it like a 10 or 15% twist or change and have something completely new and interesting that isn't necessarily, reinventing any new trope or idea, but the viewer will like it. It'll feel different enough that they'll be interested and want to, take a look and stick around to see what else is going on in the image. So in this rough stage, we just want to try and explore things. We don't need a finished, polished sketch or anything like that. We're just exploring and seeing if we can come up with new ideas. And as we're exploring, as we're coming up with these ideas, we want to try and do it as efficiently and quickly as possible, especially in this early stage. We don't want to burn a ton of time up in this early stage because we want to get our ideas out. We want to have a quick workflow so that we're not stuck or bogged down on any one particular idea and have it burn up too much time. So a good strategy is to try and use the tools you have available. If you're working in Photoshop, use what you have available. You have copy and paste, you have warp, you have skew, you have all sorts of different transform tools. So you can take what you've already done, take what you've already created, and then use Photoshop to kind of warp and skew it into a different shape and size, and then use that to generate a new idea or a slightly altered idea. So we don't always have to draw everything from scratch, go from completely blank to fully done sketch. We want to try and be efficient and use our time as the best we can. So take advantage of the Photoshop tools and try and use that to generate more ideas in an efficient way. Now, as we're sketching the face here, we still want to try and keep our design thinking in mind and remember our different design principles. So things like big, medium, and small shapes, dynamic angles, certain things like this that help images to appear pleasing to the eye. We want to try and keep those in mind. And so even though it's just the face, we can think like, what's going to be our big shape? Is that going to be the upper lip? Is that going to be sort of the brow or the forehead? Is the nose going to be the big shape? And then once you kind of establish what that big shape is, you can build up smaller details around it and try and create visually interesting focal points within the face by creating these smaller sort of detailed areas. So here I got rid of those tusks because they were kind of breaking up the big, medium, small read on the face. And I wanted to kind of create the big shape being that upper lip area between the nose and the bottom lip. It's a nice big open plane. And having that tusk go through there kind of broke the shape up a little bit. And it was just feeling a little bit goofy. So I got rid of it. And it kind of helped the face feel a little bit more complete just by getting rid of that shape. So now we move on to the next head. And here I want to try and create something that, a face that looks a little bit older. Maybe they have a little bit more experience, a few more wrinkles. There's an expression to describe older people as being long in the tooth. So I'm kind of thinking of that literally and trying to imagine that he has this sort of really big underbite with these long teeth and these extra wrinkles. So I want to see if I can try and capture that idea in my head on this silhouette here. See if I can do it in a quick and efficient way as well. We're following kind of a similar shape pattern as the other two with that big space between the nose and the lips. And then we're going to bring that down and try and show what sort of geometry is happening here and kind of describe the shapes with our shadow forms. Now we're adding little wrinkles in as well. The goal here is just try and capture it as quickly as possible and then move on to the next idea. We want just enough so that our idea can be communicated. So using this method, we can come up with quite a few different ideas in a fairly short period of time. And we don't have to constantly re-sketch or redraw everything from start to finish. So it preserves a little bit of your brain power and a little bit of your, mental energy, so that once you have those ideas, you can pick one or pick a couple and pursue them a little bit further, a little bit more in depth. Maybe the next step would be, after you get a couple of these sketches done, you can take them and do a little bit more of a detailed pass over the top of them. You can do like a line drawing where you would go in and outline out all the different, details, add a little bit more texture to them maybe. Or you can start to paint one of these up and take it from, a flat sketch and turn it into, a 3D painting with full value range and things like that. So from this step, you have a lot of different options you can go in. You can do a whole bunch of these 3/4 angle heads, and then do a whole bunch of 3/4 angle, bodies, and do a bunch of thumbnails of a figure. And then you can mix and match the head with the figure. So it gives you a good way to try out a couple of different ideas and visualize what the full figure might look like without having to do a whole bunch of, in-depth sketching and painting. I like to kind of create sort of puzzle pieces and different sort of like visual assets that I can bring into my file, and then mix and match them and experiment with different shapes and see if different combination of things that I might not have thought of if I was just drawing it from step 1 to step 10 and going through in a linear way. I might not think of certain ideas, but if I try and think in a non-linear way and create a bunch of different pieces that I can mix and match together, it helps me think more creatively and come up with ideas that I might not have, organically thought of just from a straight sketch. So I find this kind of helps me break out of, an art block maybe, or if I'm feeling a little bit stumped and I've kind of run out of ideas. If I approach it in this sort of puzzle piece style and come up with a bunch of different ideas at once, it kind of breaks you out of that linear, ABC sort of thinking, and you can find new ideas or solutions without necessarily burning up a ton of brain power. I want to try and keep the sketching phase as sort of energetic and relaxed as possible. And I feel like it's a lot easier to do that when I'm almost playing with the ideas and I'm not like locked in and focused in on one specific design, but instead I'm kind of like playing around with and experimenting with different tools and shaping things out differently. And if I feel like I'm, messing around almost in Photoshop instead of, really going 100% in one direction, I feel like ideas kind of flow a little bit better and I can relax and come up with some more interesting thoughts. Whereas if I'm locked in and really focused on one idea, it pushes all the other ideas out of my head. So then even when I finish that and it's time to, maybe go in a different direction or explore another thought, because I've locked in and focused so much on that one idea, it's really hard for me to change gears and come up with more interesting ideas. So I have to try and find a way not to zero in and focus on one so much. So I find that trying to keep it playful and mess around and experiment a bit, it sort of keeps me out of that, ultra focused mode in my head and keeps me on the exploration mode. So I want to try and, stay in that exploration mode as much as possible in the sketching stage. And so messing around and using your different Photoshop tools and experimenting with workflows You know, maybe approaching sketches from slightly different angles or ideas can help keep you in that playful experimentation stage and allow you to come up with new and interesting solutions that, you know, you might not have thought of. And as you get further along in the sketching stage, you know, eventually you will have to pick one and focus on it and spend a lot more time on it. But at this particular part of the sketching workflow, we don't necessarily want to get there quite yet. So give this method a try and see if you can quickly and efficiently communicate the ideas in your head through visual images. You know, play around with your Photoshop tools. Remember, we're supposed to be having fun and, you know, experimenting a little bit here. It's not always, you don't always have to be super focused and serious about what you're drawing. And then a good test to see if your ideas are being communicated well is after you finish sketching things out, show it to someone. You know, show it to a friend, show it to another classmate or coworker or something. And if they can understand your idea and they're understanding sort of the emotional impact you're trying to communicate or the different character traits you're trying to get through in your design, then that means it was a successful design. But if you show it to someone and, you know, you're trying to communicate a lighthearted, outgoing character and they think that they're kind of like grumpy or they have like a scowl, you know, maybe your idea wasn't as successful. Maybe you need to go back to the drawing board and try a few other things out. So once you finish, show it to someone and see what they think, get their take on it. And you can use that as a gauge to see how well you're communicating your ideas through your sketches. All right, hope this was helpful and hope you guys have a good one.